Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting concept because you can get, you get two sides of the same coin, looking at how, as you were describing it, the methodology of how a certain style or system trains and what they look at as, what they consider to be problems. And then you take what Anshu has done and look at the most common problems, and let's try to maximize what those are like when we're in a situation, A, with a person who isn't compliant. And I tend to look at, non-compliancy isn't so much for me like, I need you to move to go somewhere and you're not going to move, therefore you're non-compliant. I look at as non-compliant as you're in the middle of trying to solve a problem, and this problem keeps changing as it's developing, right? So the compliance really isn't, I'm waiting for you to make a decision. The non-compliance is, there are things that are happening that I'm trying to respond to. And the more that I focus on one aspect of trying to solve this problem, the more complicated it becomes. Because now I'm trying to make somebody uncompliant to what I want. So that I've just created a problem for myself.
Right.
So for me, the way that I train and the way that I look at it is, from the beginning, I'm not looking at this as you're going to deny what it is that I'm doing. I'm going to let this thing unfold, and as good as I can, and this is what I train for, as good as I can, I'm going to be where I need to be, to where at the moment you try to not comply, it's working against you. And I think, from what Mr. Davis, you were speaking of, and what Hardy, you're actively training in, that's what you're doing, but you're doing it through the eyes and the methodology of not just one training system, but a couple different training systems on where you put your attention to. I think it makes you a more developed ability to develop more as a martial artist, to see things from a bigger and broader perspective. And I think you can do that looking at other martial arts. I also think it's inherent and capable of focusing on, I'm an advocate for our martial art, of course. So from our martial art, but be open to the possibilities that anything that I may try to do may not work at any given moment. And the person that it's being done against may have zero skill whatsoever. So where does your training fall in at any given time? As a
Right.
beginner, Q belt ranks, we're just learning how to do things. To your point earlier, Hardy, we were talking about, Mr. Davis made the comment of, I don't know how much of a fan I am of Omote Gyaku. And then, so when you first hear that, you're like, oh, you don't like that technique? It's not like you don't like the technique, but it's so interesting that you mentioned this before, Mr. Davis, because I have gone through these things before when I was like a first and second degree, and I would look at training with Omote Gyaku, or it really could have been anything, and be like, where in the world is this going to show up in a fight? Like, how is this even going to manifest itself? And it was at that time of my training, I didn't have the wherewithal to know that you're not going to see these things. They're going to appear. You're not going to be looking, you're not trying to search out a Motegyaku or Ganseki Nage or, Harai Gosh or any of these techniques. But you learn, from my perspective, you learn all these things and you do them so many times that when they appear in the conflict, that you don't have to think about taking it. It's just the opportunity is there. And it just happens to occur. But it is during a series of other things that we get there, right? Like a lot of our, and Hardy, I've been wanting to talk to you about this as well for a while. It might be another show that we do it on, because I know we're running short on time. But I would like to go into a conversation on, we start out with this, when we do grappling techniques, stand-up grappling, we usually start, in a certain position. And the conversations that I want to have with seniors is, what happened to where we got in this position? It wasn't like, oh, I'm mad at you or you're mad at me and somebody's yelling at someone else, and all of a sudden it's like, and we grab each other. Something happened to where we ended up in this position. Something happened to where we ended up reaching out and grabbing somebody with one hand, or something happened moments before somebody got somebody else in a headlock. these are things that I like to explore, because when you're teaching it to someone at the first time, you have to make it as pliable and as easily teachable as possible. And that's why I think we start in these particular situations where we say, here's a punch coming at your head, or somebody is grabbing for your throat, or somebody is trying to get you in a headlock. But there's so many things that happen before we even get to that point, that I think that's where the mastery and the training, after you get through the Q ranks and you learn all of the tools in your toolbox, how each tool works, then you can start to explore exactly what we were talking about 10 minutes ago, which leads into this long 3 or 4 week answer of non-compliance.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at multi-gyaku, I mean, where would you use that? I mean, in its singularity, it is an interesting thing to have your wrist twisted and kind of slam on the ground. You feel all sorts of pain. But in the speed of a confrontation where you're trying to stay safe, multi-gyaku may appear as a getting the hand off your body, right? And getting the person away. So having this wrist reversing itself, you're just using it to get away, or it may be that you're in the middle of a conflict, the person grabs your throat. You've seen Mr. Hayes do this, and you're going back, you step back, and now you have your bird and you go this way, and then the person resists, and you come back and you kick them in the groin, and then you smash them on the ground with this multi-gyaku. It can't be done as you can't just walk up and grab somebody and do a wrist lock.
That's right.
They're just going to knock you out. And I've yet to run into, well, I'm not saying that it can't be done. There might be some like Daito Ryu folks that could probably put it on me, and I'd go, what? You can do that. But generally speaking, for the average citizen, it's very dangerous to do with a singularity of a technique. It's important to have it in the flow of the conflict, similar to the Ganseki Nage and any of these other things. They happen as the fight unfolds, not because you want to do it. You want to do the technique.
Yeah, I think what we end up, discovering, if you spend a lot of time in the martial art, and particularly as it pertains to things that are inherent with what we study, speaking of omote-gyaku, there, yes, it is an outside reversal of the wrist, but there are so many things that just that technique does to a body, that you can take it. I think you can take the principle of what omote-gyaku is capable of, and you can have the principle of omote-gyaku in a movement, and you never even laid hands on the hand. You never even got the wrist, in a certain position. But what omote-gyaku does when applied effectively to a body, you can utilize that principle and say, this is omote-gyaku, or the principle of Ganseki Nage. You could say, this is Ganseki Nage, even though it looks nothing like what you might see Ganseki look like on, in a series of photos or in a book that you would read it on. It's the principle of the technique that is far more important, I think, at this point of training, than being able to facilitate the technique in its specificity, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. I think, looking at this in the multi-gyaku, it appears in a lot of different ways. It appears in a bunch of different ways. I remember early on, Mr. Hayes showing us how not to use our hands to apply multi-gyaku. So you've seen this, so you start, it almost looks like a Jumonji sort of thing. You're not using your hands, but you might have your weapons in your hands.
Right.
Say if you have a weapon and somebody's grabbing you, how do you turn your body in a way where now that a multi-gyaku is available so you can apply a technique? I think in the most basic school, I think it's important to tell our students that, yeah, this is one way of doing it, but this is for later training, where if you're in a conflict, don't try to apply this. Try to just get away and escape. But
sure.
Somebody's punching your head and you're trying to do that painful wrist thing. And then, what, heaven forbid, the person lifts weights or works with their hands a lot, you're not even going to move that hand. You know, then you're mentally stuck there while they're raining fist on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important to teach the students to have the adaptive flexibility up here to be able to defend and escape. And that's what I like about the new curriculum that Mr. Hayes put together. It really allows the student the flexibility to really just get out of it and stay safe. It's not smart in self-defense to hang in.
I'm a little sad. You know, we're coming up on 9, and I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. I want to continue down the Emotogyaku rabbit hole. I want to ask more about how you've structured the way that you teach at your dojo. I want to ask a bunch more questions about the legends that I've always heard about Mark Davis. And so I guess what I really have to ask is, can we have you back on? Can we do this again?
Absolutely, whenever you want. I'm here till 9:30 every night. So
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was.
I think a Mark Davis part 2 is certainly in order, and we'll have to pick it up and just get right into the thick of things. Mr. Davis, I mean, when Hardy suggested to me that we do these types of shows, and we got a couple under our belt, I was chomping at the bit. We knew we had a bunch of people lined up, and I was like, you know what? We've got to get Mark Davis on here to give us his perspective on things. And I think we certainly learned a little bit about your history and your ideas about different martial arts that you've studied. But I think you know, I share Hardy's sentiment that when we do a part 2, I really want to pick your brain on how you feel about certain, not only techniques, but the principles of what it is that we do and what make them so effective, and what your takeaways are, not only on basic training, but getting into higher levels and advanced training as well. And I think the people that watch this show could learn a lot from your perspective as well. So, you know, thanks so much for accepting the invitation, and we'd certainly look forward to having you back again soon.
Yeah, well, thank you, gentlemen. I'm always impressed when I go to watch you guys at events and teach. I'm always impressed with your delivery and your clarity of helping people learn. That's one of the things that's really, I mean, the old days, it was good. It was old days. But you know, to have quality people like yourselves putting together a show like this and running your schools and clubs, and very, very impressive. And, you know, really good.
Well, I appreciate that.
Really exciting to see things go in the next few years. I so appreciate everything you guys are doing. I've started tuning in on these, and boy, I'm kind of obsessed. It's like so I have to go back and kind of binge watch the other ones, you know, my Saturday night binge watching, you know. But very, very good shows, gentlemen. Outstanding.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Yeah, it does. It really does. And you were one of those folks, you know, as I was growing up, and I know, you know, when I got to become better friends with Hardy and we were going to events together, and, you know, you'd be at, you know, either a festival or, you know, we'd come over and see, you know, what was going on with you and Mr. Mahoney in Boston. It was just inspiring to see others that have followed, you know, Mr. Hayes's path. You've forged your own path as well from what you learned from him. And I think it's a very dynamic, it's a very inspirational, and you know, it's a pleasure to know you, and it's a pleasure to train with you. And we look forward to, you know, more of these opportunities to kind of pick your brain on stuff. But certainly we'll look forward to the opportunity where we can all kind of be in the same room and share stories and get some good non-compliant training in.
That'll be a lot of fun.
We need to head out to East Cupcake and see what's going on.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Spend some time with the cupcakes.
Yeah, East Cupcake. But really great. I mean, you guys are. I'm looking forward to seeing the coming weeks. I saw the schedule coming up. It looks pretty exciting. You know? It's like, cool. What do these guys have to say?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm really looking forward to the future. It's very positive. Very positive.
Awesome.
We'll get through whatever this thing is, but Or we'll just have to change and adapt. That's what ninja do. You know, we
Yep.
change
That's
and
right.
adapt. You know, we don't stop. And you guys are an example of that.
Well, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Yes, thanks again, Mr. Davis. We appreciate it. And before we go, Hardy's really good at this. It just popped in my head. If someone out there were watching, or they were always inquiring on where they might be able to go to train in the Northeast, where is it that they can get a hold of you? How can we reach you online? And the name of your school again?
Boston Martial Arts Center. And I'm on Facebook. So just look for Boston Martial Arts Center on Facebook and you can go there. BostonMartialArtsCenter.com is our website. You can reach us all sorts of ways. The dojo, just FYI, is presently closed because of the present emergency that we're in. But we are going to be holding outdoor classes and our Zoom trainings and seminars and things of that nature. So everybody's more than welcome to join in. And I'm very honored to have people come by and start training and so forth. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Okay,
Thanks,
Mr.
sir.
Davis, have a wonderful time. We'll see you soon, sir. Part 2 coming up.
Yeah, part 2. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.